Australian sailing. And this session will run for 45 minutes and takes up to the lunch break. My name is Suzanne Davies. I'm from the Royal Prince Alfred Yacht Club, also known as Club Marina of the Year. That's my last time, just get that plug in. And it's my pleasure today to introduce John Lee from Australian Sailing. John's an experienced and well-regarded sports administrator. He's held senior roles in transport, tourism and government. He has extensive experience in sports administration, having previously been an Australian Sports Commissioner, as well as the CEO of two NRL clubs, the South Sydney Rabbitohs and the Sydney Roosters. You can boo or cheer as you wish. Before this, John held a number of senior leadership positions in the public and private sectors within New South Wales. John is now reconnecting with sailing, a sport he enjoyed when he grew up in the Shire. John was appointed CEO of Australian Sailing in May this year, and as many people know, Australian Sailing is a network of over 300 clubs, 350 clubs and 80,000 members, and about a quarter of a million Australians enjoying the sport each year. Today, John will provide us with an update on the activities of Australian Sailing. He will focus on the importance of sailing and yacht clubs in growing participation and the general interest in this sport and leisure activity. He will also discuss how sports are adapting or not to changing community demands and behaviours. So please join with me in welcoming John.
Thanks, Suzanne, and I am conscious that most of the audience today probably have a lifetime of experience in the sport, and in many ways I'm a novice or a beginner. I will spend some time talking generally about sport. I'll focus also on our sport and the recreational lifetime pursuit of sailing, and at some stage, where appropriate, have a bit to say about our organisation, but I don't want to be thinking inside. I'm more interested in talking about the externalities that we're all faced with. There's a famous, I think it was John Cotter, wrote a book called Leading Change, and he talked about the three common elements of successful organisations. I think it rings true for any organisation, whether it's Google, Apple, a major corporation or a small business. And it's really just appreciating your past, knowing your history, knowing what's important to your organisation, your club, your family, understanding the genealogy, if you like, of where you've come from. Also having a very, very simple but practical plan or vision for Australian sailing. It is simply that, to advance sailing, to advance, to go forward, to be forward-looking to the future, but also successful organisations are aware of the present. And so when there are small milestones that are achieved, whether it's growth in the TACA's program, whether it's about launching new craft, literally, in our sport, the NACRAs are out there in Europe at the moment and they're experimenting, and over in Europe, and we will see how they develop and how they master those new boats over time, and it's important that we recognise those milestones. I always do this sort of, it's nearly the pub test or the barbecue test about Australia Day. And I appreciate people might be live streaming some of this, and I wouldn't want it to be repeated in the media, but I'm always shocked about how few Australians really know what Australia Day, how Australia Day started. A lot of people don't know that Arthur Phillip arrived on the 23rd of January, and he went to Botany Bay, and he found that there was no running water. So he got the first fleet, and he actually rode around the boat first, checked out that there was the tank room and some running water, went back to the first fleet, and they sailed into Sydney Harbour on the 26th, and literally the rest is history. But what struck me is how few Australians know that Australia Day started with sailing. And for a lot of life, whether it's been commerce with the use of the trade winds, whether it's been about people enjoying their downtime from work, sailing has been integral to many people globally around the world in how they live their life. So I think it's quite important to recognise, especially for Australians, like we're a penal colony, and I spent some time working in government, and when you live and work in Sydney, you realise that you are a product of your history, and the fights and the tribalism that happen around Sydney, whether it's north of the harbour or whether it's south of the harbour, people are very tribal in this city. And then you head south down to Melbourne and you find that the collective efforts tend to be a little bit more collegiate. And even the way that city was planned, a hamburger patty sort of grill with lots of ins and outs was well designed. And I've heard that in many ways the government cooperates a little bit better on that basis with the private sector. I don't know how to describe Queensland yet, other than it can be a little bit cyclonic at times.
State of origin.
Yep, I've got a few Queenslanders here. They are superior in some areas, but again, they're used to dealing with climatic patterns that people down south don't have to. And it has made them a very resilient group. And unlike in sailing terms, where we have, if you like, 4 or 5 mega clubs based around the harbour, same in Victoria with literally the Bay Area having very strong clubs. Queensland, apart from Royal Queensland, which is probably the epicentre of sailing out of Queensland, it's more dispersed all the way up to the north, and with many race weeks coming up in the next couple of weeks, we'll get to see some of that as the migration of boats follow the whales, and we'll have Airlie Beach into Hamo into Maggie Island. But the future, and I know there's been a number of speakers at the conference already talking about the future, and in many ways it's really scary. I've turned 50, and I used to be really excited about the future, and I think the older you get, the more you tend to reflect on whether nostalgically the past was better than what the future might hold and how scary it might be. I'll show a video in a moment, but 4 things are definitely true, and that is there's actually a book at the moment called The Shallows, and The Shallows is a book about how this technological revolution is changing how our brain works and thinks. And our attention span has reduced by nearly 40% in 15 years, the average human attention span. A lot of people are finding it harder to read books, which was the source of education. And because of this absolute revolution in technology and information revolution coming at us, it is making us more time poor. And it also is leading, as people have learned about globalisation and the ability to literally red bullet and grow wings and fly, volunteering's on the decline. They're real things that we all face. And young people are just big consumption addicts. They're thrill seekers. They want the adrenaline rush. They probably don't have the patience that we did as a generation growing up in the 60s and 70s had, where literally a stick and a ball would entertain us for hours upon hours. They've become accustomed to different types of stimuli, mainly through devices. That means they're after a different type of thrill. But for also a lot of people, to have that intensity of life comes with how you chill out. And people do that with cuisine, with dining out, and they're looking for other ways to flip the switch. That is all real. I suppose the other, when you look at some of the work done by the CSIRO and the Australian Sports Commission, it's fair to say that for the educated, undertaking physical activity for health reasons is more important than for competitive reasons. So where once people were driven to be the best, what we've seen is a genuine decline in the number of people competing in sports, but a huge increase in the number of people who participate in leisure sports for their own health benefits. Obviously, there's also a big area around adventure and alternative sports. You only have to look at the types of, I know they talk about the mammals, the middle-aged men in lycra, but you only have to get around to some of the park areas, the national parks, to see people who are involved in CrossFit, who are literally riding bikes in bushland, BMXs, etc. And they're wanting that exposure to something that is quite different, that is unique. Not constrained by rules, not constrained by officiating, but by their own rules that they might determine as they practice or try something. For me, it's a little bit alien, but I've got young kids and they're showing me that that's where they're heading, rather than conventional sport. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about what some other sports are doing, and it's funny, having come from a combat sport with literally billions of eyeballs per annum that focus on that sport, even a potential terrorist who wore a jersey as front page of the Sydney Daily paper today. Bulldog and a bomb was the headline. And those sorts of sports get headlines for all the wrong reasons, but it actually then, it nearly becomes like Kim Kardashian, as the speaker next door was talking about, it becomes the thing that consumes people. It's like we have a permanent voyeurism going on now in this modern world. But I do want to spend some time trying to look at a few like sports to sailing and doing a few comparisons of where they've done some good things or where we might need to think about for the future. A big point that, again, I'm only new to this role and I've spent some time engaging with a lot of our clubs where the heart of our sport is. And being better connected is, I think, a challenge for all of us. How do we connect skippers with crew, both with potential sailors? It's the great challenge for all of us. It's not just word of mouth anymore, and how do we do that better is an important consideration for us. This is a short video it's about 4 minutes. I don't know if most of you have seen it. I am inclined to play it, but it is available also on the Australian Sports Commission's website. My 4 takeouts, and I'll quickly get to it, is about how do we think differently, and then at a local level, there's that old saying, all politics is local. So at a local level, how do you develop your coalition of the willing, your people that want to grow the sport and make a difference? How do we test those plans? What's working in other clubs of around the same size? Will it work for us, or are our geographical circumstances different, so maybe it won't work for us? The disposable incomes of our neighbouring population, maybe that doesn't work for us. And then how do you trial it, and if it's working, how do you embed it? And there are some really good test cases for that across our sport. I'm not going to tell people how to suck eggs. There are literally experts sitting here who have seen their growth curves in their Discover sailing, in TACA's programs, etc. Take this in, you might get 1 or 2 things to come from.
All over Australia, strange things are happening at our sports clubs. The goalposts are shifting. Club membership is stagnating, and in an effort to attract and retain members, changes must be made. But what can you do? These days there are more entertainment choices, more sports, and more demands on our time and our money. Our population is changing, and we have very different lifestyles. Yet, against this backdrop, there's been a spike in sports participation, not through clubs, but through things like running with your idol, social group cycling, going to the gym, or seeing a personal trainer. So how do you, as a club, get a bigger slice of this increasingly fractured market? To find out what influences people's decisions around club-based sport, the Australian Sports Commission and GFK Blue Moon did some research with both adults and kids. With adults, we found most people fall into 10 basic groups when it comes to sport. The loyalists, the socially engaged, the sport-driven, and the apathetic clubbers. Then there's the sideline sportsters, the club-weary, the ponderers, the self-focused, the sport indifferent, and the sport atheists. 40% of non-club members aged 14 to 65 belong to a club at some point, so there's a chance to re-engage with these people on some level. And a quarter of Australians aged 14 to 65 who aren't members of a club have expressed interest in joining one. That's 3.8 million people who potentially want to be part of club sport. So how do you tap into them? Firstly, you need to understand the main concerns adults have with club-based sport. One is inflexible schedules, clubs being too cliquey, leaving people feeling excluded. Another is the cost, and limited opportunities for beginners. When it comes to kids in sport, the research identified 6 basic types: the social loyalists, the sports-driven, and the apathetic clubbers. And then you have the thrifty enthusiasts, the ponderers, and the sport-resistant. Over 50% of kids who aren't club members now were once part of an organised sport, and 46% would think about joining a club if activities were better suited to what they wanted. These non-club members make up 1.1 million potential new recruits. The research found while some kids love the competitive side of sport, many others don't. So to attract and retain kids to your club, here's some stuff to keep in mind. Create an environment based around fun, enjoyment, and being with friends. Value each and every player, and give everyone a chance to join in, regardless of ability. And offer flexible membership options for kids and their parents. So how can this research benefit you? Well, it might help you think outside the box to improve how your club operates. Be flexible. Cater to different groups by developing new ways to get people involved. Create alternative forms of your game that focus on fun and enjoyment rather than competition. Changing the rules might be one way of doing this. Let friends play together if that's important to them, rather than trying to separate them based on talent. Schedule your sport at different times of the day and week. More teenagers might get involved on a weeknight than a Sunday morning. At your end-of-year presentation, have a social night to celebrate participation and your volunteers as much as you celebrate success. Ask your members about any issues at your club. By addressing the concerns, you can start to focus on the opportunities. Small changes now can make a big difference to your club later. Need some help with your ideas? Visit ausport.gov.au/market segmentation to access research and support materials, including presentations, fact sheets, and case studies. The goalpost.
So, was there one or two little vignettes that you might have taken out from that clip? I'm not sure. I found it interesting putting myself in a couple of different categories, not just one category when it came to being a member of a club. I think the overall theme though from that presentation, also when you speak to other people involved in the club movement, it is about having the right sort of flexible structure. You still have to have process, you have to have rules around how you operate your events and your club, but ultimately how do you make it fun, how do you make it interesting, so you actually get new people trying, especially through the Discover Sailing arrangements. I actually think in looking at our sport, there are two interesting case studies. One is around bowling, that's lawn bowls, and the other one is golf. For mine, I drive past a bowling club. I live up in Parramatta River near Ryde, and there's a bowling club that's just closed called Denniston Bowling Club. And as the tumbleweeds have literally taken over the Marias and the bowling green is no longer playable, I reflect on what was probably a very thriving club in the 50s and 60s. And I remember going there on Thursday and Friday nights, and there were very strict conditions to which the kids could even enter the clubhouse, whether they could go to certain parts of the club. They weren't allowed on the bowling greens because they were a risk to the bowling greens, etc. And it's now extinct. So then you look to a place like, this is a case study out of Clovelly, and the quote there is pretty powerful. Some people resisted the barefoot bowlers, but in the end they're bringing over now $1 million worth of revenue for that club to keep it viable. And yes, you'll still have your purists. They'll still have bowlers who are pennant bowlers, who are vital and who are really important for the stature and for the continuation of that club. But it's also important to have the social participants, if you like, for bowling. I suppose bowling isn't as direct though as golf, because for our sport there is a real cost involved in even entering the sport and participating in the sport. So in some ways, green fees and the assets required both for upkeep, whether it's a marina upkeep or the golf course upkeep, they are absolute real costs for our clubs. And they've already had a 10% decline in total membership, which is it's a big number for them. And I think coming up with different ways, I've even heard locally there's, instead of an 18-hole competition, there's now 3 6-hole competitions split up for some Sundays at that particular golf club. But again, it's always an opportunity cost between what is conventional, what is the history, and how you come up with the right sort of ways to actually make it interesting for potentially new entrants into your club and into your sport. When you break down the 2017 census for sailing in particular, looked at who were the regulars, if you like, who was having more than 3 experiences a year, and who were the ones who were just getting a light touch or a light exposure. So of the 250,000 people who generally sail each year, that group is split into 2 parts, and then if you, in a granular way, look at where it goes from there, yes, we have nearly 100,000 people who are actively involved in racing and regattas. They're the base. They're probably the most important component of our longevity and of our history. But just as important, when you look at the schools, the community, the Discover Sailing at that entry level, be it for kids or be it for adults, again, there's another 80,000 who are trying it. And I think the big test for all of us is, how do we take people from trying the sport, going out and being crew, having a good time, and then how do we get them coming back? And, you know, I'm not about to, as I said at the opening sentence, it's not for me as the new guy to dictate to people how is the best way to do it, but there are some really good examples already. I think at a recent meeting I quoted Sandringham, where they've been encouraging people to have a day sail. They then, you know, they've got a very affordable way in which they get people started, and then they try to convert them to a yearly membership after about 5 sails. Again, it's just one example. There are many different examples for each of you. For us, when we do the census, there appears to be, in terms of the trying, is where we've been growing, and that's where the 6% increase has come from the previous year. So especially around the TACAs program, it was a program with its genesis mainly out of Victoria, and then it has been extending with a national footprint, has seen some real growth, and we hope to grow that. I think we've got to, you know, as people have said, getting more women involved in our sport is important. It's been said 60 or maybe 100 times in the last year that women are the economic decision makers for young people. Gone are the days where the dominant male could leave the house at 8 o'clock on a Saturday and return for dinner. If that exists, you're nearing a dinosaur. If you can still do that, well done. But it is not what is really happening in the majority of households across the country. So getting women, onboarding them and getting them active, especially where there is all sorts of commentary around the contact sports and about the potential impacts to long-term health for some of the contact sports, we're in a beautiful position where we have a very safe sport, a very easy way to try our sport that we should also promote. I suppose there is also, we talk about the double-humped camel, for those of you who aren't that familiar with our sport, where we get a lot of people at the young age, up to about 15, to people literally, you know, hit adolescence and study and university and love and travel and marriage and other things, and then we tend to recollect people in their mid-40s, and they sail on for the rest of their life. That growth tends to stay there. I think it's our job to lift the 2 mountains as much as we can and just hope that the trough isn't as low. I think it's a risk to invest too much where there's so much distraction and literally the financial requirements of trying to live your life in those sort of early days of adulthood and then parenthood for those that choose it. I think for our sport it's great to have heroes, so it's great to have, if you like, the Formula One of our sport, the America's Cup. I think it's good for people who live in the industry and work in the industry to be able to observe some of that. Same with the Australian Olympic team. You know, Peter Condy, we have 100 people in that program. It's not something I'm dedicating a lot of my time to, even though I come from a high performance background. It's great that we outperform nearly every other sport in terms of, you know, world champions, in terms of our Olympic effort. We need to invest in that, don't get me wrong. I think it's important that, and a lot of you sponsor individual athletes and great kids who come through. You know, they might be at the 29ers at the moment over at Long Beach, or they might be competing at the Worlds, and that's excellent. But that, to me, that's unlike some other sports where, say, in AFL, you have a player who becomes the role model, which is the reason a kid then starts Auskick. That's not something we aspire to. Ours is all local and it's at the club level. And that's why participation is important. Why have I put a mobile phone up here? I know there's connecting people is a really important thing, and I don't know how we get that right. That literally on your screen is a trial of a new app called Craft and Crew. A guy by the name of McAllister is trialling this app. At Australian Sailing, I think there's always a risk when you only back one horse. It's a bit like backing one class in terms of the development pathway for sailors. Yes, there are some good single-handed boats and double-handed boats in that sort of pathway up to Greenfleet, etc. But in the technology space, I think it's going to come pretty quickly. If you like, again, I wish we weren't broadcasting, I'd probably use a different app to describe this, but it's sort of like rsvp.com. You want to match-make people, so you want to match the craft and the skippers with the crew. Not that you want a real veto right, but if you're the skipper and it's your boat, you've got some definite obligations and rights with the right mix of people that you want on your boat, but I think there's a great opportunity for us to do that better. And I hope that's going to, especially for the larger clubs who've got the wherewithal to test that, I think that's going to be a real development in the next sort of 12 months to 2 years. Look, foiling, everyone's talking about foils. You know, they're the great thrill seekers of the future. I've even heard that Volvo have talked about a 60-foot monohull that will be foiling, before Santa comes this year. Well, that would be amazing. I'll be honest, I fell in love with the America's Cup. It was great all right through to Australia too, and I find myself looking back at the 1970s, and I was really big on World Series cricket when some of my friends were traditionalists, and now I find myself more a traditionalist in terms of sailing rather than foils, because I see some of the foiling and I think it's pretty bloody scary. It's exciting and it's amazing, but some of the safety aspects really need to be thought through for our sport, especially for non-foiling boats who are at the same start line as foiling boats. I think that's important that we consider that. It's an obligation on all of us, especially for inexperienced young sailors who might be doing something like 20 knots, 25 knots. That's weaponry stuff. So I think we need to be aware of it. Yes, it's exciting. Yes, we've got to be absolutely a part of it. It is the future. And I'm literally just going to show you a clip straight out of Europe where Lisa literally sent this through. I hope it's going to work. With the new NACRA and what but it's also this. It's also about leisure pursuits, and it isn't necessarily just about competing. There's been also commentary about what I call it the 4 C's. The cost of entering our sport is big. I know, again, clubs are looking at different ways to syndicate or to get people to be involved in sailing that doesn't involve that sticker shock of having to literally purchase the boat. Some clubs have got a better balance sheet that they can make that offering at the moment, but I think that's definitely something we need to think about in the future. How we compete in a time-poor world, how do we structure some of the afternoon sailing events so they're not as long, so people who are time-poor can participate. Also, I talk about cost, there's competitions, there's the clock, the overall time requirements and being involved in the sport, and there's communications, how we communicate better with people to make sure that they're involved. Look, I know I've just got 5 minutes, and I've put up, if you like, around 8 or 7 important things that we all need to consider. I think they're, especially for our Commodores and our GMs who are here, they're already things you're thinking about. It is, ultimately, there's a change, there is a change in the behaviour of the population, and we need to be aware of that. Whether it's they're less competitive and they're looking for a leisure sail, whether it's around how we engage people so we can actually have enough volunteers to stage some of our races. Is it a different way in which we've got to provide that learning? Should it be more online rather than conventional chalk and talk? There's an examination in terms of our own facilities. Are they the right facilities? How are we going, opening up the gates and encouraging people in? I'll never forget a famous man called Graham Pash. He was a Western Australian who ran as part of the racing industry. He had a lot to do with many sports, but he always said, how do you get the young people through the gate? And he was very big on trying to get the catchment within 5 kilometres of your own gates. And he said, you shouldn't make something free. There should always be some sort of way, a payment to enter. But once they get there, they should have a memorable time, not a forgettable time. And I'll always remember Graham's words for that. Questions around, gender, family, the different products we offer, and then how we engage more widely. We've got a lot of questions to ask. I find, look, as I said probably 3 or 4 times, I'm new to the sport. I'm seeing some wonderful work being done by many people across the country. We are living through a revolution. The technological revolution is real. I don't know where we'll land in about 10 to 15 years, but the condensation, whether it's in time or effort, is real, and we're going to have to make the necessary adjustments to that. So thank you very much for coming today and listening to me. I'm happy to take some questions.
Does anybody have any questions for John? Sure.
Yeah, sort of not quite a question, John. Great presentation. I just want to encourage not quitting on the 15 to 35-year-olds. So your double hump model is dead right. That's where we are. I can't imagine any other sport not worrying about hanging on to their 15 to 35-year-olds. And there are ways, and we did such a great job in the leadership with the TAPAS program and the junior program, and we built on that all across the country. I reckon if we really turn our heads to it, we can do some clever things, and we've heard a lot about shared boat ownership and all sorts of things in that 15 to 35-year-old. I'm going to be sharing that with everyone. So,
right. Can we just end our last streaming, if we don't mind, Jeff and Peter? When I was age 22, I went to the Wet Sundays and worked at Contiguous Wet Sunday Resort. So I do get the 18 to 35s market. I did back then. And
engagement with that group of people. I'm not saying RYA has the perfect model, but RYA has a broad church of engagement with all types of voting, and I think that we have to embrace that both within our clubs, which we attempt to do within our club, with strong cruising groups, but it has to be, I think, the leading edge of the sport as well, and our peak body needs to do it as well.
yeah, no, I think again that's an excellent comment, and in visiting your asset to actually see windsurfers out there and kiteboarders out there, you're very fortunate that you've got that. I don't know if we're calling it East Beach yet, are we? But that area set aside as a launching pad for some of those other wind sports, I think is really important, and you've done that. But also, it's a great challenge for all of us. How to get people who really aren't in a competition, who own a yacht, to then be involved.
But they have an interest in education, they have an interest in safety, they have an interest in destination.
Families want to learn sailing together.
Yeah.
And they're not in those humps.
Yes.
They're right in that spot that I'm not going to ignore.
Yeah, no, good point, Sean. Yes, Peter.
The problem is you're not getting to the non-sailing public. During the 34th America's Cup, I had the rights to the America's Cup. I had 500,000 people across Australia watching that non-sailing audience. As the producer-director of Fox Sports, I got through this America's Cup Event Authority, I got those rights. During the last 35th America's Cup, I had the same arrangement with geo-based situations. And until the whole Australian Marina group get together and realise there's a big audience out there that want to watch it, it's interesting, it's exciting now, and join together to get that interest back into sailing from the non-sailing public and all the kids that go with that, you're just going to go, as you know, on the downhill down.
Yeah, I'm not here to be contrarian, but my experience in some other sports is that is not the case. eyeballing does not guarantee participation. It's actually the other way around. If you look at all the longitudinal studies that are undertaken, especially by the AFL, if you participate early, you're 7 times more likely then to want to watch the sport and then buy merchandise and be a member of a club. So usually it works the other way around. It's usually about trying something and having an interest in it at first and then staying with it. Look, we're not an eyeball sport. We're a participation sport, so I think we've got to know what we are. Even during the Rio Olympics, with I followed Tom. I followed him for years, and I even struggled to watch it on Channel 7 because of the way we were poorly scheduled by the broadcaster. So,
Definitely.
our hope is not eyeballs on mainstream free-to-air TV. I think it is about how locally we engage with our communities, the Manly community, the Perth community. How do we get to those households? And I could give you a different example. Again, it's a racing example, but in the winter of 1 year, a race club decided to give away a very small motor vehicle that a sponsor had offered. And then they letterboxed within a 5-kilometre radius the opportunity, if you turn up to the races, you go into the draw to win the car, and they had a 30% increase in attendance at that race club over those 5 weeks that they promoted the giveaway. So we've got to look at different ways to market and promote and to entice people to come and try, so then they get a good experience and then they want to return again.
Yeah.
I think.
We just had the second, sorry.
Together, I think, is the important issue, and I think it's a broader observation that I would take away from this conference, is we have the Sydney Boat Show getting ready right outside the front door here. We've got a conference going on in here. We've got Australian sailing with Peak Body. I think the symbiotic relationship is not there, that it would be so easy to value add and to synergise on one another. Every dealer down there selling a boat would love to say, where do you come from, would you like to join a yacht club?
Yeah.
Conversely, the Marine 17, okay, they're still setting up tonight and tomorrow, but with the attendees at the Marine 17 conference, like to preview what's going on at the boat show.
Yeah.
I think we lack that.
The
siloing is still there,
Yeah,
and the horizontal integration is regrettably it's probably there on a one-to-one basis, but not on that formalised basis where we can all take advantage of the situation.
I think we're in furious agreement with you. Howard's here at the moment, and we've had that. We had a catch-up only 2 weeks ago to talk about how do we coordinate those things better. It is real, and I was out on the harbour on Saturday for the start of the Sydney to Gold Coast race, and you're right. There are actually more pleasure craft boats than there were sailing boats on the harbour because it, like bees, beds to the honey pot. There was a natural attraction, and we should be working more closely together. Fair point.
That was the second longest sailing race in Australia, and we had 46 entrants.
50 other areas.
Hey, that's the problem. And as you mentioned, you're not going to go to the general market. But unless you get to the general non-sailing audience, along with that, as you said earlier in your presentation, come the sponsors. Trying to get sponsorship in sailing at the moment is just about zero.
It's a challenge.
There is cooperations though. We started up a cooperation between 3 clubs, Australian Sailing and the Perth International Boat Show. So we're doing something there where we've got a market attackers program and the Discover Sailing programs. And with small investments from each club and some private entities coming into that. So there is, all those partnerships is what we're going to look for, like you guys are saying. I just listened to RYA's training presentation, and I do think that you guys have a point there, with the whole education thing, that we need to link up that other side of it. It's not all about tactics instructors or sailing coaches, or we need to look at that whole different platform.
There's a lot of young adult families who want to learn to sail together. They want to learn in dinghies.
Yeah.
And we've got to be able to accommodate that as well.
They have that platform. We don't need to reinvent it.
We've got to integrate it. Stop talking about it as something separate. It's not accessible. And it's a great opportunity for Australian sailing to just seamlessly feed that out to clubs as a completely integrated part of the curriculum.
Okay, great feedback.
But sailing itself has been insular, the way it promotes itself. You know, it's the only sport that I know of that shows the participation but doesn't tell you what's going on. 90% of all the videos, I see them all around the world, are just, you know, the water lapping on the shore, the logo of the boat, the front and the bow of the boat. With the boats go out there and play the clunky music, and it's just boats bobbing along. You know, that's what they put out, you know, producers all around the world as in being representative of sailing. It doesn't tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't do that to a football match or anything, any other sport,
Yeah.
except for what they do to sailing. It's just ridiculous. We should be promoting ourselves and saying this is what's happening. You know, sometimes it's hard to explain, but at least, you know, say what's going on.
Yeah, but make it more simple then. If it's hard to explain, we're going to make it more simple.
Yeah.
And that's the, you know, we can argue good concept or not. But, you know, the M32, for example, they got a manager there who doesn't understand sailing at all. He said, why can't we just sail from A to B 10 times and whoever's first wins? And all the sailors sits there and wow, that's not our sport. No, but if I come in and tell you you get $1 million if we do that, oh, they will do it, you know. So it's. I think we need to look at our concept, you know, how we do those things.
Yeah.
Sydney to Gold Coast, 46 boats. When was there more? Was the race different? Probably not. I mean, you know, it did get bored.
Well, I must acknowledge the CYC's presentation of the live feed on Saturday. It was, if you look at comparing it to what else has been happening in the Australian market in sailing, it was there. And
Yeah.
Jonathan Winning, the guy that put it all together with John Winning's equipment, basically as a producer-director, got the people around, showed the footage, and went through the whole fleet.
Yeah.
Instead of just showing the boats that were winning, as they went back through it all, and because they had people on board that knew details of the particular boat, and Sean Langman, being a maxi sailor right down to a mini sailor, could give all the details on how the scenarios are happening. It just opened up, I think, the next scenario. And then what you need to do, like last year I had 4 of these cameras going to Hobart on the big boats. You live feed from these boats and you interface that back through your live feed in your presentation.
I think they're good advancements. Sorry, Sean, you're going to...
Oh, look, mate, the conversation always goes back to, you know, more promotion of the heroes. I just applaud what you're saying, John. It's great, and I want to see big race fleets, but, you know, the main game's got to be getting participation happening. Windsurfing provides a really interesting insight into this. We lost, the first wave of windsurfing came and went in the clubs. Clubs got nothing. We just left it. We wondered what was going on, and there's all these people out there sailing, having a great time. With, you know, 2% of them decided to go racing. They were nomads that go to the best beach or go to the best place to go windsurfing. So we're lucky enough to have started windsurfing, and the big emphasis is on learning and having fun and participating. And yeah, sure, we hold the race board worlds and we love racing fleets and we had 80 competitors all over the place. But the main game is putting your arms around them, finding a little place for them, giving them some facilities to wash their gear and hang out together and sticking a barbecue there.
And the important thing is though, again, for health benefits, they're wanting to stay fit, they've got an appreciation of wind and water, and then hopefully then you're transitioning them on when their knees start to give way, or their arms give way, that they'll then progress straight over to a boat.
Already happening, they're already hopping on boats for a sail.
That was our Ian, very quick last question.
Last question. I was the Australian DJ Championship champion in 1949. I've been sailing ever since, but now I operate ferries on Sydney Harbour. And what we've found that we need to do is have a greater appreciation of the rules of the road and the rules of boating rather than the racing rules presented through the young folks, because I take all of my crew out and put them on a sailing boat and say, here's the perspective that the sailors see our ferries coming through the harbour. We're on a schedule, we're on time, we're trying to do good things. But there are so many people who go sailing who don't know actually the prime rules of the road. And it's very good if the yacht clubs could address this as well as their learning of teaching sailing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think I've got plenty of good ideas and furious agreement amongst us all, I think, and plenty of will to get there too. So if you join with me in thanking John for a great presentation. I have been asked just to remind